Hi, I'm indie fantasy author Melinda Cusera. Welcome back to my channel. The characters from the Curse Breaker series listened to the program that I recorded a couple of days ago where I read and responded to the email that one of the characters from the series sent out. And they brought up a good point. Since this is a new venture for me, podcasting and also YouTube, maybe it might make sense to start with the beginning of the Curse Breaker series, which is Curse Breaker Enchanted, and read that to you guys and talk about it. So I'm starting another series within this channel, and that's what we're going to do in it. I'm sure they'll come up with a snappy name for it. Right now, I'm just going to call it Reading Enchanted, because that's what we're doing. So you can thank the characters for that. Namely, the sidekick, the child character in the story, Rand, because he's the most vocal character and the one who goes off script the most and completely destroys every outline I've ever created. But I'm not here to talk about that. That's in the writing update, and that'll be in a couple of days, unless he interferes with this reading. So let's get to it. Curse Breaker Enchanted is the first book in the Curse Breaker series. It's also the first book that I published. I've been writing the Curse Breaker series since I was a teenager, but all the earlier drafts starred different characters, and it was mostly me trying to find an entry into this giant world that was in my head, that I actually started creating the world that the Curse Breaker series takes place in when I was a little kid. They were the basis of every story I ever told my younger sister and my younger brother before bed. Every story that I told the kids that I used to babysit when I was a teenager. I just couldn't find the right entry point. So I've got lots of drafts where different characters do different things, and it never quite worked. Until one day, Sarin walked into the room and took over the entire story. There was still something missing, and then one day, this little boy just appeared in the book out of absolutely nowhere with a name and a backstory, and I don't know where he came from. But immediately the story snapped into place and things started happening, which was exciting because before we were just sort of wandering around. There was lots of drama, but it wasn't the adventure kind of drama. I said before that I have a younger brother and a younger sister. My sister actually passed away in 2014 from complications of diabetes. But while she was still alive, I used to drive her absolutely batty by talking about these stories and telling them to her. And I actually begged her to read one of the stories that I was writing, and that one is actually going to form part of the 10th book in the series, Curse Breaker Joust. And she read it, and she's like, oh no, this is really good. I really like it. But it's not a first book. And I was like, what are you talking about? She's like, well, it doesn't read like an introduction to a world. Like, it's the beginning of something. We're in the middle of something big. So I took her advice and I went back, and if this is not a good place to start the series, then what is? And just started working backwards. And I wrote drafts of other stories. One of them is Rand getting found out because he is a secret in the Curse Breaker series. Nobody knows about him except Sarn and the orphans that he used to live with. That revelation story actually is told in Curse Breaker Revealed, which is the 9th book of the Curse Breaker series, which is actually coming out at the end of September. So that wasn't a first book either, so I'd put that aside, and I'm glad I did, because the version that is in Curse Breaker Revealed is very different from the original version I wrote like 10 years ago, and it's much better. It's much more fun. No spoilers, because I already read to you the first chapter of Curse Breaker Revealed in the previous program on this channel, the September 8th Books and Writing Update, I think I called it. Totally unsexy title. So back to the background, I guess we can call it, for Curse Breaker Enchanted. That book didn't exist, so I wrote a bunch of other drafts about a bunch of other stories, and that will be the basis of later books in the series. So I kept chasing, where the hell does this begin? What's a good place to bring us in? And eventually I hit on what became Curse Breaker Enchanted, and I wrote it. Unfortunately, I didn't hit on that story until after she had passed away. The last time we spoke, the last words that she said to me, gotta finish this. I'd had an idea for what might be in Curse Breaker Enchanted, and I told her it, and she said to me, that sounds like a really good idea. You should write that. And promise me that you'll finish it, that it won't be another one of those unfinished drafts that I have on my computer with. She didn't want this to be another one of those. She wanted it to be finished and published, so that's the last word she said to me was, finish it, publish it. And I did. It took 2 years after she passed away to finish it. It was very broken up. Her death hit me really, really hard. And for a while, I just listened to the audiobook for The Lord of the Rings over and over on repeat, even while I was sleeping. I went to Mordor many, many times with them until the grief started to ebb. It was very difficult to lose my sister. She was 29 at the time and I was 34. You think you're going to live forever at that age. You know you're not, but you don't feel like death is walking with you with one hand on your shoulder. And it took a long time to get past that. And writing the Curse Breaker series helped me heal in a lot of ways. All right, I've talked too much. Let's get into it. The first version of Curse Breaker Enchanted was published in 2016. It had a homemade cover because I didn't know what I was doing. At the time, I was making very little money at a job that had an expensive commute. I had barely any money to buy groceries, so paying for an expensive, beautiful cover, there was no way I could do that. I did the best that I could, and I put it out into the world. And the reviews were really good on it. I was really surprised because I didn't have a lot of money to spend on it. I spent what I could and did as much as I could, and I was proud of it, but I still felt that it could have been better. So I went back and I redid it, and I put out another version. I think it was a year and a half later, but I still wasn't satisfied with it. So in 2020, I redid it again and put it out with a beautiful cover. And the characters got really mad at me for doing that again instead of moving the series forward. There's a note in the beginning of the book from the characters complaining about me. They also complain about me in my newsletter. I think that's its primary job right now, is for them to complain about how I'm not writing this or that for them. All in good fun, of course. Enough on that. Let's start with their note. The last version is called the More Epic Version Revised. Hello, readers. We, the characters who starred in the original book, wanted more action, drama, and mayhem. Hey, we're readers too, and we wanted our story to be as epic as possible, so we convinced our scribe to do a more epic version. The more epic version had more of everything we love, but it still wasn't right. We searched high and low for the answers and went on many side quests, which we chronicled in our weekly adventure series. That's the newsletter that I was just talking about. It started out as side adventures for the characters, because new independent author, I didn't know what you put in a newsletter, and all I do is work or write, so I have a really boring life. But my characters are really interesting, so the newsletter became about them and not so much about me, since not really much happens with me. Let me get back to this note. And if you want to sign up for that newsletter and experience all of their shenanigans, you can go to www.mkucsera.welcomecharacters, and that will get you in. So back to the note. One day we realized the truth. Curse Breaker Enchanted isn't one book, it's 2 books. But those 2 books had spent 3 years together as one book, and it didn't seem right to separate them. So we didn't. Instead, we changed the formatting to make it clear where one book ends and the next begins. They're labeled as parts since we have always published them together as one book. We also had each part re-edited, and you are hopefully reading the final edition. We'd like our scribe to work on the next story arc and leave this one alone. There's some cool stuff sitting on her PC, and we'd like to get that into your hands. We hope you enjoy both of the books that make up Curse Breaker Enchanted. Sincerely, the cast of Curse Breaker Enchanted. So that's the note. And now let's go to part 1, Betrayed. Sarn had a lot of power, but no one would let him use it. That was before a man he'd swore an unbreakable oath to serve betrayed him and left him for dead. Now Sarn's lost with only the clothes on his back and the magic in his veins. But he's not alone. An evil entity has infiltrated the enchanted forest, turning its protective power against the people of Sheari, and it's between Sarn and his family. They might be in danger too, if this menace reaches the mountain where they live. How will Sarn reach them in time? Chapter 1. Sorry, Sarn said, as he collided with someone burlier than he was. The unlucky passerby struck the magical field that always surrounded him, and hopefully bounced harmlessly off it. But Sarn couldn't stop and check. If he did, someone might see his green glowing eyes and report him. Magic was illegal, and he had far too much of it running around inside his too tall body. Enough to warrant the death penalty if anyone in power ever found out. Delve down deep, delve into the roots of the mountain, urged the magic sharing his skin. Why? Sarn asked his magic without breaking stride. He had to reach his master before the next bell rang, or else. Sarn checked the map scrolling across the back of his eyelids, seeking a convenient gap, but saw only 1,909. Snapped his magic after performing a quick count of the people icons surrounding his head map, which it maintained. Whatever, Sarn shot back. There were way too many people between him and his goal, forcing Sarn to slow down, so he didn't mow down everyone in his path. Why do you want me to go downstairs? My family's down there. Are they in trouble? Fear gripped Sarn as he patted the bodies ahead of him, searching for a way through. The Litharians, his magic said, as if the name of that long-vanished race explained anything. But his magic seemed to think it did. Not that again. Sarn shook his head. The Litharians were a bunch of stone mages who'd carved out a city inside the cone of a mountain, and their statuary fixation complicated his commute. Sarn cursed at the wall of bodies halting his progress. They funneled through a narrow gap between two giant statues ahead. At least that's what the icons on his map said they were doing. While he waited for the crowd to move, he might as well find out why his magic cared about the builders of this place. Why are you interested in Litharians? They've been dead for centuries. You could find out what happened to them, his magic taunted, but it didn't offer a reason for Sarn to care. The Litharians likely lost their way in the maze they'd left behind and starved to death. But Sarn didn't feel like arguing with his magic anymore, so he kept his theory to himself. He needed to get to work, not search the bowels of the mountain for clues about a legendary race of dead mages. Besides, someone might hear him talk to himself and get the wrong idea. Sarn felt a break in the crowd ahead and squeezed through it, only to walk into another man. Sorry. Sarn hurriedly apologized, but the crowd still hadn't moved. What was the holdup now? Unnatural, screamed his magic. Sarn ignored it as another gap opened to his left. He slipped through it, but only gained a couple more feet toward his goal. Damn, this was taking too long. More grumbling accompanied Sarn. It was likely the same warning again. His magic liked to repeat itself until he gave in to its demands or something distracted it. What do you want me to do? Sarn asked his magic when its grumbling continued. It was a low but insistent drone sawing on his last nerve. Sarn didn't care if the people he squeezed past heard him talk to his magic. He just wanted it to shut up, so he could concentrate on locating his master before the next bell rang. I can't just drop everything to find the unnatural thing upsetting you. I have somewhere I have to be. His magic didn't care about the oaths he'd sworn until it had to enforce them, and it would if he didn't hurry. His overactive magical gift pressed against his closed eyes, begging for release. Well, he'd show it who was boss. Sarn pushed his magic down while he felt for a way past the bodies in front of him, but his hands just encountered more people, and none of them were moving. Double damn. Unnatural. His magic pulled at him, knocking Sarn off balance. The ground trembled, and 900 people panicked. Okay, fine, 909, Sarn corrected himself when his magic protested. It didn't like inaccuracies of any sort. Shouts of earthquake finally motivated the crowd to move. They shoved past, jostling Sarn in their haste to exit this tunnel. If this was an earthquake, then he had to go back. I must save. Sarn slammed into one of those damn statues before the fearful thought could complete. Those oversized marble annoyances were everywhere he turned, surrounding him. His cloak caught on one, and Sarn tugged it free. Had he wandered into an installation? He must have, because stone-cold hands brushed across his burning eyes and the magic fighting to escape his hold, and that power ignited a fierce green blaze inside him. Let us out! His magic pushed against his eyes, opening them as Sarn stumbled into the cold, hard arms of another statue, and they closed around him. A slice of white marble slashed across the emerald glow, wreathing a sea of heads. No! Sarn squeezed his eyes closed and tried to slip out of the statue's grasp, but its hand squeezed his arm. No! Sarn had to get away. I must save. But that thought cut off as his awareness winnowed away. It shrank down to the stone hand grabbing his hand as his knees buckled. Where the hell were his damned gloves? Sarn had promised to wear them all the time. Why hadn't he put them on? Let us out, begged his magic as Sarn slid away. His awareness seeped out of his ungloved hand into the statue holding him, then into Mount Regiment itself, and finally beyond it to the darkness, reeling Sarn in as a dozen voices repeated 5 unintelligible symbols. Im, Meyer, Eritar. They hammered a warning into his fading consciousness. Wrong, 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 shouted his magic right in his ear as the world blackened and silence fell. But Sarn still didn't know what was so wrong. The ground stilled, calming the crowd. No one saw a statue pivot on its plinth and deposit a shaking young man behind its base, nor did anyone see a green glow snake down his scarred cheek when his seizure ebbed. Sarn woke up in the corner. Magic blanketed him. Maybe it had protected him from discovery, but he doubted it. How long had he been lying there? long enough for the mountain to calm down and the crowd too by the sound of it. Just in case it hadn't, Zarn kept his eyes closed to conceal their emerald glow, so he didn't freak out any of the people passing by his hiding spot, and his magic didn't fight him. That was a pleasant change, but it wouldn't last. His magic was contrary by nature, and he was borrowing trouble again. Zarn put those thoughts out of mind and hoped his family was okay. He had no way to know if they weren't. He couldn't go to them, not while the oaths he'd sworn tugged at his mind and changed every thought to what he should do, find his master, a ranger called Nolo. But his family. Zarn sat there, torn between his duty and his family as conflicting promises warred within him. May the fates protect his family until he could. Zarn pressed a hand to his aching brow and winced when his head map exploded from a two-dimensional, icon-rich line drawing to a three-dimensional wireframe, like he needed those extra details. They just pointed out how much of the mountain stood between him and his waiting master. Sometimes his magic was a little too enthusiastic. What just happened? Zarn asked his magic, but it had gone mute again. What a wonderful time for it to stop talking to him. Oh well, he needed to get moving. Zarn felt a high-relief carving of some historical event or other and searched it for a handhold, then hauled all 6.5 feet of himself off the floor. He almost fell flat on his face again as information slammed into him, providing the tonnage, context, and type of stone he'd just touched. Damn magic. Why couldn't it wait until he was steadier before drowning him in so many unnecessary details? Zarn gritted his teeth and sifted through that information, seeking what had disturbed his magic until a sharp ache cut across his brow, forcing him to stop. He stuffed his hands into his pockets, despite the protest from his magic, and information quit pummeling him. Relieved, Zarn pushed into the growing throng, letting it sweep him into its flow. He didn't know what had just happened, nor did he have time to figure that out now. His master's green icon blinked on his head map, reminding Zarn of his promise. Unfortunately, the guy kept moving. Where the hell was Nolo going? Zarn left the crowd behind and slipped into a side passage that hooked a right off the north-south transept. The sudden turn screwed with his balance, and he wavered until the visuals projected onto the backs of his eyelids stabilized. But in his haste, Zarn struck something hard, a sculpture perhaps, judging by the shape of the wire-framed heap to his left. The Litharians had folded rock to imitate paper's crisp folds and silk's graceful drape while sculpting their vertical city. Then they'd wrap the 5 balconies around said mountain fortress, adding extra space for their statuary obsession and more obstacles to dodge. An arrow flashed on his map, and Zarn turned toward it, then had to avoid another statue. That arrow now pointed to a balustrade, and beyond it to the meadow spreading out from Mount Eredron's feet. Ah, so his master had business in the enchanted forest tonight. Maybe the problem his magic had complained about was out there, but intercepting that man had just become harder. Zarn bypassed a column supporting the veranda above and stepped over a raised vegetable patch with care. Its young shoots might become part of his dinner one day. Footsteps, out of sync with his quiet tread, accompanied a new icon flaring on his map. Uh-oh, someone was coming this way. Had someone followed him? Why would anyone follow him? Zarn couldn't think of a reason other than the obvious. Someone must have seen his eyes. Tonight just got better and better. Zarn cursed his ill luck. Well, he needed to go down. Zarn climbed onto the coping and jumped before anything else went wrong tonight. Thank the Litharians, their balconies overlapped each other, and they widened as they descended. Otherwise, he'd be in serious trouble. Magic sheathed Zarn in green light as it reached for the balcony below, turning it malleable. After falling several stories, Zarn landed in a crouch on a stone bench. His magic forced the bench under his boots to flex and absorb the energy from his fall. The mountain liked when he used his magic. What a scary thought that was. It kept popping into his head at the oddest moments. But that couldn't be right. Why would an inanimate pile of rocks care if he used his magic or not? It wouldn't, so he was just being silly, and worse, he was wasting time. Zarn scanned the balcony, found no one there, and relaxed a little. Since he was alone, he opened his eyes, and their glow dyed the balcony and its statuary green. Zarn blinked until his map minimized, and the flagstones lost their polygonal after-image. After a brief internal struggle, his map parked itself in his peripheral vision, but it continued to update itself with the best route to his master. At its prompting, Zarn turned to face the balustrade again. The wind tugged at his cloak as it whispered 5 syllables. Eam, Meyer, Eretor. It repeated them 3 times and faded out. Zarn hopped off the bench. What had the wind just said? Nothing good, he'd bet. Beyond the balustrade, a red orb bled into the serrated horizon, and the metallic stench of blood wrenched his guts. Darkness ripped through the enchanted forest, where a silent army of trees waited for something or someone. Their eyeless stare focused on Sarn, making his skin crawl and his magic circle him, alert for trouble. Thousands of branches waved in the lowering darkness, beckoning him onward. Or was that a trick of the wind? Sarn backed away from the balustrade and straight into trouble. A warning sounded in his head, but it was too late. Trouble had already found Sarn. And that's it for chapter 1. I hope you enjoyed it. And I hope it's clear from what we just heard that Sarn is an earth mage. His magic is particularly interested in stones, not in anything else. He's also living in an underground city. It's carved into a mountain, like Khazad-dûm in The Lord of the Rings, but different motifs, lots more statues, most of them placed in the way, and most of them are warrior statues. A lot of the decor is very military, and the Litharians are an ancient race of stone mages who created this underground city, and all the statues that are in everybody's way. And there's a reason why the statues are there. Book 11 is going to clear up that mystery and maybe add some new ones. I'm not sure, because Sarn and his son have never met an outland they couldn't destroy in one chapter. So there's what I would like them to do, and then there's what they want to do, and the books end up being what they want to do, because I don't really want to fight them. It's more fun if I just go with the flow. The other thing that I wanted to discuss is Sarn has a seizure in this chapter. When I wrote this, I was very much grieving for my sister, and she had a condition, but I couldn't find a way to do diabetes in a fantasy world. So I went with something else, an epilepsy sort of condition. It seemed to me that we could do in a fantasy world and have it work. I wanted him to have some kind of affliction. Otherwise, he's just an overpowered hero, and that's not fun to read about. But an overpowered hero who's got a condition, who is limited by promises, and you'll see as the book goes on, he is overpowered, but there are so many limitations placed on him that reduces that, so he's not overpowered. We'll see that as the book goes on. Keep a watch for that. And if you're liking what you're hearing and you want more, Curse Breaker Enchanted is right now available for free as an ebook and also as an AI narrated or auto-narrated audiobook, meaning a computer is reading it. But the computer version is actually really good. I've gotten a lot of positive comments on it, and those two are free. It is also available in paperback and hardback. Paperback and hardback are a little bit pricey because everybody takes their cut. I get maybe $1 from each of them, but it is what it is. And you can just hop over to my website or check the show notes or the description, depending on where you're listening to this. And I'll have a link in there to my website where you can find all the links to all the places that you can get it. And I hope you'll be back for the writing update, which should be interesting. And we'll continue this next week with chapter 2. Thank you for listening and have a great day. Don't forget to like and subscribe, depending on what platform you're on. That really helped me to know that people want more. The characters want me to do more, and I don't know if they're going to actually let me stop. They seem to think that me reading this and recording it will magically lead to us getting really good audio that we can use for a human narrated audiobook. But I think it's a little bit more complicated than that. I've tried in the past to do this, and there's all sorts of mixing and mastering that has to happen, and I don't know how to do that. They seem to think I'm going to magically figure this out. Maybe I will. I don't know. But thank you for listening and have a great day. Don't forget to check out Curse Breaker Enchanted so you can read along with me or read on ahead.